If we can't have a child, then maybe we should consider divorce, Carter declared. I paused for a moment before responding. Just as I was about to share my final decision, I thought of surprising him with the news. "All right, I understand," I replied flatly. "Let me give you some context. I'm a homemaker in my 30s, married to Carter, who works in an office. Our love story began when I was employed at a food-related company. We gradually bonded over casual conversations, and I found myself drawn to his occasional warm smiles. Eventually, I mustered the courage to confess my feelings and ask him out, but he turned me down. "I'm sorry," he had said. "I appreciate your feelings, but I already have a girlfriend." I accepted his response, assuming that was the end of it. However, fate had other plans. A month later, he approached me with unexpected news. "I broke up with my girlfriend," he admitted, "and I'd like to be with you." Apparently, my confession had lingered in his mind, and he couldn't stop thinking about me, leading him to end his previous relationship. I felt guilty, wondering if I had been the cause of their breakup, but Carter reassured me with a gentle smile. "Don't worry," he said. "It probably wouldn't have lasted anyway." His words soothed my unease, and our relationship flourished. After 3 years together, we got married. Carter had always expressed a strong desire for children, and he asked if I could leave my job to focus on our home and future family. Since my workplace was far from ideal, I had no objections. I embraced the role of a full-time homemaker, ready to build a peaceful life together. The transition wasn't easy, but I didn't mind. I took pride in creating a warm home for us. We lived close to Carter's parents, just a 10-minute walk away. At first, I worried that frequent visits might lead to tension, but his parents were nothing but kind. They welcomed me warmly, treating me like the daughter they never had. "You are more precious to us than a grandchild," they would say. "We've always wanted a daughter, so let us spoil you." I especially grew close to Carter's mother, Hazel, and found quiet reliability in his father, Andrew. For the first few years, everything was perfect. Then things changed. Slowly, the warm affection from Carter's parents turned into cold disapproval. Andrew withdrew into silence, and Hazel's kindness morphed into something unrecognizable. It was as if she had been hiding her true nature all along. Where she once reassured me about children coming naturally, she now pressured me relentlessly. "Where's my grandchild?" she would demand each time she visited, especially when Carter wasn't around. She would compare me to other women in the neighborhood, constantly reminding me that others were getting pregnant while I wasn't. But what Hazel didn't realize was that Carter had long since lost interest in having children. Despite his initial excitement, within a year of our marriage, he had become completely indifferent. Every time I tried to initiate intimacy, he brushed me off. "I'm tired," he would say. Or worse, "Don't interrupt my game." When I confided in Hazel about this, she ignored my words, continuing to blame me for our lack of children. Her relentless pressure weighed on me heavily, making it feel impossible to breathe. Eventually, I reached my breaking point and told Carter about the stress his mother was causing me. He sighed, unwilling to engage in the conversation. "There's no rush," he muttered. Still, he reluctantly agreed to try more, though our efforts remained fruitless. And with each passing day, Hazel's criticisms only grew harsher. Desperate, we turned to fertility treatments. I hoped this would finally bring relief. Instead, it only drove a deeper wedge between us. Carter, who had always been somewhat distant, withdrew even further. He began spending all his free time locked in his room, playing video games. He stopped engaging with me, barely acknowledging my presence. His irritation flared over the smallest things, complaining about minor expenses, snapping at me over trivial matters. Anytime I reminded him that I had left my job for the life he wanted, he would scoff, calling me a freeloader. Then, one day, I discovered that Carter had quit his job without even telling me. When I confronted him, he simply shrugged. "It's none of your business." I was stunned. I tried to reason with myself. We had savings. He could collect unemployment benefits for a while. But his complete lack of concern, his unwillingness to even look for work, filled me with dread. With him home all day, our interactions became more frequent, but far from pleasant. Our conversations turned into arguments, and then into silence. I started questioning our marriage. Was there any love left between us? Or had it already crumbled beyond repair? The breaking point came when I finally confronted him. "You need to stop playing games all day and start looking for a job." I snapped, exhausted from his inaction. His response? "Oh, by the way," he said casually, "Mom thinks we should get a divorce if we can't have a kid." For the first time in a long while, I felt a rush of gratitude toward Hazel. Because, unbeknownst to Carter, I was already pregnant. I had just confirmed it at my last checkup, planning to tell him that very night. But now I realized I didn't have to. I looked at him, my mind made up. "All right," I said. "I understand." I pulled out the already completed divorce papers from a drawer and handed them over to Carter. His expression shifted from shock to disbelief. He hadn't expected me to agree so easily, much less have the documents ready to sign. He stammered, frozen in place, his usual commanding demeanor vanishing. He looked like he wanted to say something, but his mother's influence loomed over him. Eventually, with clear hesitation, he signed the papers, his eyes darting toward me repeatedly. Later, we sat down to discuss the division of assets. In reality, there wasn't much to divide. Carter had always complained about my spending, but the truth was, he was the reckless one. Not only did he waste money on games at home, but he also squandered large sums at gaming centers, leaving his finances in ruins. When he realized we had no joint savings or significant assets, his disappointment was evident. Still, he pointed to a savings passbook and suggested, "We should split this too." I shook my head. "That account isn't part of the settlement. Those are savings I built up before our marriage. It's legally mine." His face went pale. Then, as if grasping at straws, he turned to the condo. "I should at least get the condo." I met his gaze with a calm smile. "The condo is under my name, and I've already listed it for sale. You can't stay here. It wouldn't be appropriate. Besides, I've been saving up for a new home, one that's better suited for the future." Carter's expression twisted in disbelief. He had always assumed I was financially dependent on him, never realizing I had built my own wealth long before our marriage. Even with the proceeds from selling the condo, I had enough funds to purchase a comfortable home in the city. And since all these assets were acquired before we wed, they weren't up for division. The realization hit him hard. He had no claim to anything. He sat in stunned silence as the reality sank in. Our discussion ended quickly after that, as there was little left to resolve. With everything settled, I officially filed for divorce at City Hall. The process went smoothly, and soon we were no longer husband and wife. A few months later, I returned to my parents' home, where I received their unwavering support as I prepared for the arrival of my child. When the time came, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. I named him Rowan, inspired by a name from the Bible. My days became filled with the warmth of my child's laughter and the loving presence of my parents. I never told Carter about the baby, fearing that if Hazel found out, she would try to interfere. Meanwhile, Carter, now homeless, was forced to move back in with his parents. The shock of my quick agreement to the divorce seemed to have taken a toll on him. He rarely ventured outside, and when he did, his disheveled appearance often drew unwanted attention, even from law enforcement. His situation had become pitiful. I later learned that he had resigned from his job due to conflicts with colleagues. Apparently, his abrasive personality had alienated him, particularly among his female coworkers. Isolated and disliked, he eventually quit. Perhaps he had always been this way, only putting on a facade of kindness in front of me. 3 years later, I took on the role of manager at a local craft store, a place I frequented often. One day, the store owner approached me with an unexpected proposition. "I'm planning to retire soon," they said. "Would you be interested in taking over the shop?" With my parents actively helping with Rowan's upbringing, I had enough free time to take on new responsibilities. Running the store seemed like a fulfilling way to stay engaged while also serving the community. Without hesitation, I accepted the offer. One afternoon, while assisting a regular customer, I was caught off guard by the sudden arrival of Hazel and Carter. Their attempts at polite conversation felt forced and insincere. "What brings you here?" I asked, maintaining a neutral tone. Hazel hesitated before blurting out, "Give me my grandchild." It seemed they had finally discovered Rowan's existence and now wanted to claim him as their own. "Why did you keep this from us?" Carter demanded, clearly agitated. "We were still married when you got pregnant." I met his gaze without flinching. I stayed silent because I wanted the divorce to go through. "If you had known, you and your mother would have done everything in your power to stop it." Hazel, undeterred, pressed on. "That child belongs with us. We spent 3 years together. You can't keep him from us." I was speechless at her audacity. Just then, my parents arrived, having been alerted by a concerned customer. "Is something wrong?" my father asked, sensing the tension in the air. As they stepped inside, Rowan clung to my mother's hand. Hazel immediately softened, stepping toward him with an affectionate tone. "Oh, what a handsome boy. He looks just like Carter did as a child. Look, I'm your grandmother." Before I could intervene, Rowan pulled away, clinging to my mother. "I only have one grandma," he stated firmly. My mother smiled and gently but firmly asked Hazel to leave. However, Carter had other plans. In a sudden outburst, he lunged forward, trying to grab Rowan. "Just hand him over to my mother," he shouted. I stepped in front of my son, but Carter easily shoved me aside. Just as he was about to seize Rowan's arm, my father swiftly intervened. With a precise movement, he executed a flawless shoulder throw, sending Carter crashing to the ground.